let's have a look at step 2, how to actually create a retirement plan. So the first thing that we need to do when creating a retirement plan is to establish our benchmark rate of return, or the expected amount we expect our portfolio to grow every year. Now I know we've just talked about 4% every year plus inflation, but we're probably going to go a bit higher than that because we're able to take less predictable investments with more volatility, which also have greater long-term returns. Now if we look at stock market investments, the average return from stock markets tends to be around 10%. But because this is a retirement plan, and because we want to account for the worst case scenario, we always recommend benchmarking lower than 10% and using a safe figure of 7%. Remember we said earlier, if you overestimate your growth, you're going to have less money than you need in retirement, and that's a huge problem. If you underestimate it and get it wrong and it's too much, you've got too much money in retirement, and that's not a problem. Well, that's kind of the same philosophy that you want to take in retirement planning. There's a lot of costs to getting it wrong if you are underperforming expectations, but you're not particularly happy if you've invested too much. I would always recommend using around 7%. You can go 8% if you're feeling a bit more adventurous. And typically, the longer you have until retirement, the higher you can have that benchmark rate of return, up to probably a maximum of 10%, I'd say. Well, maximum of 9%, 10% being the long-term average. Just because while 10% is the average, that doesn't mean it's going to be the average for the 30 years you have until retirement. You could be during the worst 30 years of the stock market, and you need to be prepared for worst case outcomes rather than best case. Now we've got our benchmark rate of return, we need to have a look at what are the current assets that we have which could be used to fund our retirement. Because while we have the target retirement sum figure, that's if we were starting from nothing. And most people have assets that are going to help them in retirement anyway, so we should be including those into our retirement calculations. Once you've understood which of your assets are going to be used in retirement to generate income, we can start adjusting them over the next X number of years, depending on when you want to retire, at our desired benchmark rate of return to find their value in retirement. Now, just a note, if you've got $100,000 in your bank account, but you know that money is going to go towards a house purchase, which isn't going to help you in retirement, that shouldn't be used. But for example, $100,000 in your pension scheme, that certainly is retirement income and should be applied here. Now, in my example scenario, I have 60,000. We're going to keep it simple and keep euros because it matches our retirement destination income. So 60,000 euros in our pensions and 40,000 euros in outside investments, which we know are going to be used for retirement, which gives us a nice 100,000 round figure. Now, using that benchmark rate of return, we are going to then understand if they were to grow by an average return of 7% every year for 30 years, what figure will they be worth at retirement? And that figure is around 761,000. So without doing anything, we already know that we've got 761,000 of that 2.4 million figure that we calculated in section 1. So what we're looking to understand now is how much left we have to make up. And that would be what's known as our retirement shortfall. The difference between what we need and what we have now if we do nothing. And the retirement shortfall is very easy to calculate. You just subtract the current assets expected valuation in retirement, and you subtract that from the target retirement sum to see what's left over. And in our case, we have 1.66 million left over to achieve. So now we've calculated that figure, it's important to understand how we can then make up that shortfall. Now, traditionally, the most common way to invest towards funds retirement is by investing on a regular basis, often. And that requires a calculation that we have here, which is the monthly compound interest formula, which is incredibly complicated, and I'm not going to force you guys to do it at home. So we have included a nice, easy link in order for you guys to just put in your details, and it'll spit out the amount of money that you need to invest on a monthly basis over your desired level of time at your preferred benchmark rate of return to achieve your desired retirement shortfall figure. Using that link, I can discover that in order to achieve my retirement shortfall of 1.66 million, I'm going to need to invest around €1,358 per month, which would represent a total investment of around 488,000 over that 30-year term, and that will lead us to a profit of 1.117 million. So that's best case scenario. You put in how much you need to get,